What if Earth had rings like Saturn? Imagine waking up one morning, stumbling to your window, and instead of the usual empty blue sky, you see giant shimmering bands of light stretching across the heavens. You rub your eyes, but they're still there, painted across the dawn in shades of silver and gold. Earth has rings now, like Saturn, and everything about our world just changed. But how would these rings actually look? From the equator, they'd form a thin, glowing line, slicing the sky in half. But the closer you move to the poles, the higher the rings would appear in the sky, stretching into arcs above your head, like a permanent rainbow that never fades. At night, city lights would fight to compete with them, because even in darkness, the rings would glow, reflecting sunlight back toward Earth, painting the sky in pale bands you could see even without a telescope. You wouldn't need to wait for a solar eclipse to see a cosmic wonder. You'd just look up while brushing your teeth. If you lived in Canada, you could sit on your porch and drink coffee under a massive arc of glittering ice and rock, stretching from one horizon to the other. And if you lived in Kenya, you'd watch the rings hover like a bright, thin blade cutting the sunrise in half every morning. Of course, for Earth to have rings like Saturn, something huge would have to happen. Maybe a long time ago, a giant moon got too close to Earth and broke apart under our gravity, creating billions of icy and rocky pieces that spread into a flat, beautiful ring system around our planet. These rings would hover above the equator, rotating with Earth, too fast to fall down, too trapped by gravity to fly away. But, as beautiful as they would also change everything. Nights would never be fully dark, and stargazing would become more difficult near the equator, where the rings would outshine many stars. Artists would paint with the rings in mind, poets would write about them, and kids would grow up believing the bands of light were the normal way the sky was supposed to look. Navigation and science would change too. The shadow of the rings would fall onto Earth, creating bands of darkness that moved as the seasons changed. Crops growing under these shadows might grow more slowly, and farmers would learn to plant around the movement of the shadows. Birds and animals that use the stars to navigate might get confused, and migratory patterns could shift, changing entire ecosystems. But humans are clever, and we would find ways to adapt. In cities, the rings would become a new kind of clock, their shifting shadows a reminder of the passing days and seasons. Scientists would study the way sunlight passes through the rings, learning about their structure and composition. They would send probes and satellites to fly just above the ring plane, capturing photos that would fill textbooks and screensavers for generations. And we would have problems too. Satellites we rely on for GPS and communication would have to dodge ring particles like racing through a cosmic obstacle course. Space agencies would need new maps of safe zones between the bands of debris, carefully plotting the gaps and lanes where satellites could safely orbit. Any mission to the moon would have to plan a careful path through the rings, avoiding collisions with chunks of rock and ice that move faster than bullets. The rings themselves would be a reminder of the violence that created them. Every piece of ice and rock would be a fragment of something that once was whole, and as they orbited above us, they would occasionally collide, breaking into smaller pieces, creating new streams of dust and ice that would glow under the sun. And sometimes, a piece might fall from the rings, entering Earth's atmosphere as a shooting star, a bright streak across the sky that would remind us that even beautiful things can be dangerous. But despite all the challenges, people would fall in love with the rings. They would become part of human culture, woven into our stories and dreams. Lovers would meet under the rings and make wishes on falling ring fragments. Festivals would be held during the brightest ring displays, and musicians would write songs about the way the rings looked at sunset, glowing in colors of pink and gold. Some scientists might even dream of building giant structures in orbit, using the rings as a highway to space, placing solar power stations or observatories along the stable orbits just above the rings. Imagine looking up at the rings at night and seeing tiny dots of light, the lights of humanity's future cities in orbit, shining like additional stars in the bands of light across the sky. And in schools, teachers would use the rings to teach children about gravity, about how they are held in place by the same force that keeps us standing on Earth. They would teach them about Saturn and Jupiter, about how Earth is now like them, and how we share a connection with the giant.